some end users who are going through the process of staying compliant and some folks there to help us along as well. This is the first in what'll be a series of opportunities to learn how to get compliant, what to do once you're compliant, and how to stay compliant. And everything in between, after, and before. These folks are smart and going through it, and just leading the way and helping others to get there as well. So I'm excited to be here and to help host this. I'm going to turn it over quickly to Mo to allow him to run the first part of this series for us. Keep in mind, this is being recorded, and you can put your questions in the chat or the Q&A, and we'll try to get to those as much as we can. If not, afterwards, we'll get those answered for you by the next session as well. So again, happy to get this started. Hot topic, and I'm going to turn it over to the folks who really know what they're talking about. So Mo, go ahead and take over, and you can set the stage for what to expect.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Bobby, for the introduction. And hi, everyone. Thank you very much for taking the time today to join us. Yeah, as Bobby said, we're going to be talking about licensing today. Who doesn't talk about licensing? I think that there are not a lot of people in the F&O world that are not talking about it. So yeah, that we figured maybe we take some time, I know with some of the gurus in the area, as well as two folks from the clients who are actually implementing the licensing and then trying to stay compliant. So Todd and Steve, they are mainly two end users, the clients that are going through these license adjustments to stay compliant with Microsoft. Alex and myself, we are more on the partner side. Alex with FastPath and Delinea, he helps a lot of the customers to stay compliant, not only from Microsoft compliance perspective, but also from a SOX and SOD compliancy, and myself as a partner as well. We're helping a number of customers to actually do whatever they have to do to stay compliant with the latest Microsoft changes. With that, I'm just going to be very quickly going to the next slide. Okay, perfect. So I'm going to do a very quick introduction of myself, and then I think Alex, Todd, and Steve, if you could do the same thing, would be great. My name is Mo. I am a D365 F&O technical architect. I've been in Dynamics world for over 12 years. And yeah, working with them on D365, helping a number of clients now with their licensing issues. I'm going to pass it over to you, Steve.
Thank you, Mo. Hey, everybody. I'm Steve. I work for Grable Companies. I'm an end user of D365. I've worked in the AX D365 space for, really dating myself now, 15 years or so. It's been a while, but happy to be here. Look forward to conversations. I will pass it over to Alex.
Thanks, Steve. My name's Alex Meyer. First off, thanks everybody for joining today. I work for a company called Delinea, which acquired a company called FastPath, and probably know me from there. I do a lot of speaking and technical stuff in the security, licensing, audit space. So really excited to talk with everybody today. So I'll pass it. Tad, do you want to go?
Sure. So for those of you who don't know me, it says Tom on the card, but everybody calls me Tad. So feel free to choose either one. I'll respond to anything. Similar to Steve, I'm in the customer space. I work for the Kurt J. Lesker Company here in Pittsburgh. And as the global IT manager, my responsibilities are to maintain our ERP and CRM and all of the integrations and connections and third-party systems and that giant octopus of applications. And I've been diving headfirst into all of the licensing and security changes necessary to stay compliant and be compatible with our to be expiring enterprise agreement that before the end of next year. So I'm hoping I can bring some real world experience to those of you who are like me in the middle of your licensing journey.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And Bobby already introduced himself. So with that, we're gonna go to the next slide. So as Bobby mentioned, this is a series of multi-sessions that we're gonna have. This is the first one, and obviously we're gonna be covering a little bit of the basics and talk about why Microsoft are introducing this, when they're introducing this, what should you do to stay compliant. So basically, we're going to talk about the basics. We're not going to go into some complicated scenarios. For example, what if you develop something and it messes up your security roles, or what if an update hits you? So that is a discussion that we're going to have in the next sessions. But basically today is going to be talking about, what licensing looks like right now, what are the dates that you have to follow, what are the tools that are at your disposal to stay compliant. It's going to be, me, I'm going to be moderating, but, I think the four of us, we will be, contributing to the content that's on the slides. So yeah, it's as I said, the mix we have here is really interesting because we have Tad and Steve, who are end users going through the exercise. Alex and myself are working with a lot of customers as partners, and so we're going to bring you a lot of information with different perspective, from an end user perspective as well as from a partner perspective. The second part of this discussion today is going to be actually an open discussion between all of us. If you have any questions, if you have any comments or anything, feel free just to leave it in the chat, and we'll try to go through them one by one. And then finally, we'll talk about, we'll do a wrap up at the end, and we'll talk about the next session that we're going to have, actually next sessions as well. Just very quickly on those next sessions, the next one we're going to get, start talking to how do we get compliant. What are the mechanisms that we can have to review and adjust licenses and roles to be consistent. The next one probably is going to be, okay, now that you're compliant, what should you do? So that, and finally, we're going to talk about those scenarios where you have an update to your D365 and then all of a sudden you're no longer compliant. Just to give you an idea of the roadmap of the session that we're going to have, but anyways, those are going to come in the upcoming months. So I'm not going to go too deep into them, but this is what we have in mind for the next sessions. All right, so we're going to get started here. As I said, the four of us, we're going to jump in and then add as much information that we think is necessary to give to you guys. Hopefully, you're going to learn a little bit more, about the licensing and how you can stay compliant. So as I said, we're going to talk about the what, the why, the when, and the how today. The first thing we want to get the basics, 100% on the same page is that, when we talk about user licenses, the licenses changes by Microsoft, we are strictly talking about the user licenses. So if you have device licenses, you don't need to worry about that. We are exclusively focused on those user licenses, the licenses that are assigned to your, users that are using the web portal of D365. And then within the user licenses, you have the full licenses, an additional one. We're going to just touch a little bit the basic of what is a base license versus an attached license. And then you have all these other licenses that are actually very interesting from a cost perspective. They're much cheaper than the full license. I'm just going to touch on that very quickly, and then we'll jump into the real deal, the compliance from Microsoft. So the concept of base attached, most of people know this, but very quickly, when you need a full license, and this only applies to a full license, if you need to have access to modules in finance as well as in supply chain, you don't have to pay two independent separate licenses. Microsoft, they give you a discount. So if that's for that single user, if he has to have an SCM license as well as finance, you normally only pay one time the full price, the 210 in this particular case that I'm giving you. And then for the second license, you only pay a fraction of the cost of that license. So in this case, again, if Mo needs to have a finance license and SCM, for Mo, you need to assign a base license of finance or SCM. And then the attached license could be the other license. So in this example, if I have finance as base, I'll pay $210 for the finance license. And then my second license will be called an attached license, and that will only cost $30. Again, this is a concept that applies only to full licenses. So if you have any of the licenses below here, the additional ones, you do not need to worry about an attached license. These are just the prices. I'm not going to go over them. They're all in USD. The full licenses start at $210 MSRP price. And the attached licenses, they are all $30 US dollars. So if you want to just get an idea, basically that's how it looks like. Then you have the
I may be jumping ahead here, Mo, sorry, but one thing to call out there is if you have sysadmin roles in play, they are not subject to license enforcement. Likewise, if you have additional roles on top of a sysadmin, they are also omitted from the whole license enforcement. So I know we're going to get into more conversation about you can't just apply sysadmin roles all over your company. That brings other risks and other problems, but that is excluded from any of this license enforcement.
Well, I would say it excludes you from license enforcement, but it doesn't exclude you from licensing.
Correct. Yeah, but it's not going to. Your sysadmins are not
stop
going
you.
to lose access. Yeah.
Yeah, we're going to get to that part a little bit later in the slides where we talk about different scenarios where you don't need to have a license, and that this cannot become a cheating mechanism, because then a lot of people think about, oh, okay, great. If I'm sysadmin, I don't need a license, so let me assign that to the users that we don't have the license for. So it could be abused, but yeah, we'll get to that. Very, very good point, Steve. Just going to go back to where we were. So yeah, and then you have the additional user licenses where the concept of base attached does not apply. It's in your best interest to actually assign these licenses from a cost perspective to users as much as you can, because obviously these ones are much cheaper. They are the HR self-service, the team members, and operations activity. HR self-service is very limited in what you can do if you have that, if you're assigned that license. Basically, that's just for your absence, vacation entry, benefits you want if you're using the HR module. Team members is a license that, again, very interesting, especially if you're doing any cost optimization, because this license costs a fraction of a total cost of a full license. However, it can give you read-only access to pretty much a lot of the screens in D365. It also allows you to do some very basic expense entry, updating contacts, stuff like that. So yes, I would say 90% of these is read access only, but you do have some very basic write accesses if you have a team member's license. Then you have operations activity, more Dynamics 365 capabilities than obviously is larger than team members. You do get to do a lot more editing and a lot more write operations inside D365. However, it's limited to operations such as if you want to post journals. So if you have a user that needs to post journals, or if you have a user that needs to configure parameters of a certain module, then this operations activity will not work. You have to upgrade to the next level of to a full license, basically. So one of the full licenses.
Hey Mo, so one of the places where you can usually make the distinction on the operations activity license is if you need to do physical transactions in the warehouse and production, things like that. A lot of times you can configure it to use the permissions and the privileges will work with an operations activity license. Anytime that you need to do a financial transaction, posting a packing slip, ending a production order, anything that's going to have a financial decisioning, that's where you would need to go to the higher level license. Now there's some fuzzy stuff on the boundary there, but physical versus financial is often a place where you can make that distinction.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the comment, Tad. Steve, Alex, anything from your side? Actually, the next one also talks about the different license tiers that we have.
Just from my perspective, one thing to call out here is, I think even as recently as September 30th, Microsoft was still regrading some of these roles and privileges. So this is a moving feast right now, everybody, and I'm sure Alex can elaborate more on this, but the more that they keep changing it, it's no surprise that the deadlines keep shifting because there isn't a solid base on which to build everything. So I heard September 30th, there was another update at that point. Alex, I think you could confirm that as to whether it did go ahead, but that was another set of roles that were going to change.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
there's a lot of moving parts still. To Steve's point, Microsoft is still even on a release by release basis of F&O, but also on the PPAC side, they've been updating the license requirements for certain roles, duties and privileges. So those are still getting updated. So that's something to keep in mind. There was an extension that was done recently, and basically announced to push this. The enforcement date is now going to more align with your contract renewal, right? So it's not going to be everyone is going to have this be impacted at this date and time. It's more going to be based on your renewal, but they've kicked that back. That methodology starts on January 15th next year. So that's kind of anything after that kind of goes through that 30-day or 45-day, I guess, technically, renewal cycle. And I'm sure we can talk about that. So, but Bo's got this pulled up. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal thunder. So, but yeah, that was one of the big announcements recently. And like Steve said, I think that was in reference to the fact that they were still Microsoft was still making changes to the license requirements for these roles, duties, and privileges, and even the object level, all the way up. And they still are in some cases. So, it's hard to hit that moving target in that aspect. So, definitely something to keep in mind as you're going through this.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think exactly as you said, Alex and Steve, the reason why Microsoft pushed this is because there are still a lot of changes, and it's kind of unfortunate because a lot of the people actually started being compliant, and then the updates came in, and then all of a sudden they're probably not back to square one, but they were still, they thought they're done, but they had a lot to do again. So yeah, we'll actually come back to this slide. In a couple of minutes. But yeah, so this is again on the basics. So this is basically what you have as cost. And you have a Venn diagram on the left-hand side here where you can see that, the higher roles, they actually include everything that the lower roles have. So in this case, if you have a HR self-service, you can do only limited operations. Your team members will cover everything HR self-service has, plus other things. So you'll never be in a situation where you assign the team members as well as HR self-service just because the team members already has that. And then finally, activity has everything team member has, and finance, SCM, commerce, project operation, HR, which we call them full licenses. They actually have everything the activity has, the activity license has, plus other functionalities that they provide. So again, from compliance perspective, you always want to, assign the role that's required. You do not want to assign the role that is, if someone only needs an activity license, you never want to assign to them a finance license, because obviously now you're paying approximately $160 or $170 more expensive for that user. So that's from a compliance perspective. From a license cost optimization perspective, you definitely want to push your users towards the center of this diagram as much as you can, because then you're making a huge difference in your costs. So as you can see, HR self-service is only $4, team members is $8, activity is $50, and then all these other licenses, the HR project ops is $135, and then you have the SCM finance and commerce that are $210. There's also another one called SCM Premium, Finance Premium. It does have some analytics, other components integrated into that. I haven't seen a lot of use cases myself of using this license. I don't know, Steve, Tad, and Alex, if you have seen use cases where you definitely want to go to that license. But yeah, that one also exists.
There was some talk at one point, but I think it's gone away since then, that you would need something like Finance Premium to use some of the Copilot agent functionality. But now some of that Copilot agent functionality is now tied into the M365 Copilot license. So I've backed away from thinking I would need something like Finance Premium for the folks that want to use the agent. But I do know that the premium licenses also come with some larger capacity allowances per license. And so that may factor into your decision for getting the higher capacity in your license versus a separate, what is it, pay as you go for capacity, depending upon the size of your database and your files. So there's different use cases for it. The one use case that I thought I was going to need it for agents apparently doesn't, is no longer necessary.
Mhm.
Yeah, my wife was of the same opinion as Tad, and there's one thing in there that Tad brings up that we may want to spend some time on, and that is how capacity is impacted by these licenses too. So I don't know if it's called out specifically in this slide deck. Maybe it's something we can talk about in this webinar, or we talk about it in another one. But every user, every license allocates an additional amount of capacity. So that's another, gotcha moments that you've got to be careful of. If you do reduce this greatly, there is a downside impact on your capacity. So one to be aware of.
Yeah, so Bill asked a question about, is there a capacity chart anywhere? And Kevin brings up a point that if you want to know what the capacity allowances are, that is in the licensing guide, but maybe we don't do it right now, but we can do it in the future. You should go to admin.powerplatform and you can see all of the current usage. And there's also a chart that shows you how much per license is granted. And you can poke around at that. I think we should probably do that at some point, maybe just not in this session. We'll have to see how the rest of the conversation goes.
Yeah, definitely. Alex, anything you want to tell?
Yeah, I mean, I think the capacity, I was initially told that we should focus on, getting the user licensing from a security perspective done, and that the capacity would be later on. But I actually did a similar licensing session for the India user group last week and was told that Microsoft has started to enforce or at least report on the capacity side to the point where it's showing if you're not budgeted enough. So I think that we do need to make sure that we are at least in some aspects keeping that in mind. But the biggest thing is to remember that the Dataverse capacity pricing was not created with the scale of a lot of the D365 instances, right, being brought onto it. And so I think you'll see there are behind the scenes things going on to address some of that. So again, that is a moving target as well, but I think Microsoft understands that they can't, in good faith, basically say, hey, here's a 1 terabyte or multiple terabyte D365 environment. You're going to pay $40 a gig or whatever it is on Dataverse, right? I mean, obviously that's not tenable going forward. So there has to be some carve out being made on the capacity side. So, but I
think that kind of answers Jennifer's question about the capacity increase, that
Yeah.
there's, it's being addressed or talked about because they realize there is a huge conflict there.
There are some things that are still under NDA that will be coming out. I don't have a time frame on them. Fortunately, I can't talk about them, but those are discussions happening right now. So Drew posted the current licensing guide, or the table that's in the licensing guide. So you can use that as the current. I mean, that's what's publicly available, but there will be some changes coming up at some point here in the near term.
I mean, just to talk a little bit about why this is all still a moving target, the engineering teams are concentrating on performance and the consistency of data for organizations who are going to have mixed environments between Dataverse and Dynamics, and that's all great, but they don't really worry about the impact of syncing more data between the two systems and what that's going to do to your storage allowance. After the engineering team goes and makes what they will call improvements in the system to push out more data and collect more statistics and telemetry and transactional details and all that sort of stuff, then it pops up in front of everybody's face, and then we go back to the marketing and sales teams and say this isn't going to work. And that push and pull between the engineering requirements to be able to fulfill business objectives. I mean, as a customer, my business objectives, and what it's going to take with the licensing. I don't think that push and pull is ever going to subside. And so we need to stick together and make our voices heard. And so hopefully this conversation today is a start of that.
Yeah, definitely. And I think as Alex and Steve put it, the capacity enforcement is next in line. For now, with all the deadlines that we see pushed for the license enforcement, I think that is also pushed towards probably the end of 2026. And I also get the question from a lot of customers where they say, okay, do we have to start working on it? And I definitely have mixed feelings, but I think they better wait until Microsoft figure out this licensing thing, because each license tier here comes with a certain amount of capacity that you get. So once you do the adjustment, you might actually be fine, because if you're buying more licenses, you're going to get more Dataverse capacity. So yeah, very interesting subject. I think it will be one of the sessions where we will do a deep dive. I've seen a couple of customers already doing that optimization, especially on the bad job history. Some of them are really heavy and they can easily be just purged. But yeah. Any other comments here from anyone, Alex, Tad, Steve, before we move forward? All right. So we are going to have, as I said, the second part is going to be just open panel discussion. So if you have any comments, we could leave it for then. So very briefly on the device licenses, they are not impacted by what we're talking here. And normally, they're advantageous if you have multiple user, multi-shift warehouse or production floor workers. You can assign one license to their device, and like that, you only pay one time, even if multiple users are using it. Now there are some adjustments you have to do there, because you want to make sure the right person is using the device. But anyways, we're not going to go too deep dive into this, just because it's not impacted by the enforcement. Very quick question that we can almost skip this. It's about, what's true about attached licenses? Given that this is a virtual session, so I'm just gonna tell you that you always need to have at least a base license before you require an attached license. And this is a rule that has to be followed by everyone. All right, so now that we talked about the basics, we're just going to go over the when question and a little bit the why question, I guess. Why Microsoft are doing this now? Why didn't they do it 5 years ago, and why they're now waiting to do it later on? So basically, this is the old date that this is slide here. The timeline that Microsoft they had before, almost 2 weeks ago, and this is the new one. So basically, they were supposed to be a hard deadline for everyone starting November 1st, where everyone had to be compliant. Microsoft changed that, and now it's actually a sliding, a floating date based on the customer. So number one change they did is that instead of it being November 1st, it's going to be January 15th. So January 2026, that's the date that it will be actually enforced. And it will not be enforced on everyone at the same time. It will be enforced to you based on your renewal date or end of contract. So if you have a renewal that only happens, let's say October 2026, that means you have 1 year to go. So you don't have to make it a priority one. On the other hand, if you have a renewal end of January, unfortunately, you are not one of the lucky ones. You have to actually get started working on it and get compliant. And those are a little bit I guess the ones that are renewing in January, February are going to be the guinea pig ones, because I don't think everything will be finalized by then, but yeah, obviously you have to be, you know, trying your best to stay compliant if you're, you know, in early 2026. But basically that's how it's gonna work. So what every customer has to do, they have to determine what their anniversary date for their contract or their renewal is. This is the timeline that Microsoft provides. So what they tell you is that once you know your renewal date, which should be very easy to find, you need to start conversation and start preparation 90 days before. And this is just a best practice. So normally it takes 3 months to do all these adjustments based on Microsoft. You could start later or sooner, that doesn't matter. What date you really want to keep in mind is 30 days before that date. And why this is important, because 30 days before your renewal or anniversary, you're going to get these pop-ups in D365. And that's where your users are going to be obviously not very happy to get all these notifications in the system. So once that anniversary date passes or renewal date passes, you only have 15 days as a grace period to be 100% compliant. Any days after that, you're risking your users not be able to actually enter the system, log into the system. So you definitely don't want to hit this date, or definitely not after that. You definitely want to be, you know, make sure that you are fully compliant before the 30 days, ideally, if not before your 15 days is over. So this is the timeline that they provided. This is as of 2 weeks ago. If it's gonna change, I think it could still, you know, we don't know if Microsoft will change it or not, but I don't know, the guys here, I think I'm going to open this for discussion. I think this makes much more sense than having one deadline for everyone, because now at least, you know, the first few customers, they're going to, you know, report feedback. They're going to, you know, tell them the pain point about the enforcement. And then, you know, it's going to be a much better rollout of this feature to the entire community, rather than, you know, everyone one day they get all these messages and good luck contacting Microsoft support on that particular day because there are so many fires are burning.
So I would say
with that, yeah.
I would say regardless of what your anniversary renewal date is, starting at T-90 to start preparing, you're leaving a lot of unused runway. Start today. And if your renewal date is farther out, you just have more time to get it all right. Remember that when you're changing all of your security roles to align with your licensing, you're probably going to have to change some business practices to go along with it. If you have to take somebody's right away, if you have to take security away to get under a licensing limit, you're going to have to adjust a business process to compensate, and those conversations take a lot longer. So start as early as you can. Ours doesn't expire with the new deadlines and everything. Ours doesn't expire for a very long time, luckily, but we're not taking the foot off the gas now, because if we do, it's going to be that much harder to convince the organization to change later.
I think, Tad, you just answered Janet's question. She's asking about that expiration. Looks like they are locked in till June 30th of 2027. So she's got till that long, but again, your thought is, and I think that's why we're doing is you got to get prepared now and start thinking about how this is, you know, how this is trending so that you'll be ready to address it.
Yep.
So if the
But I think
end of
Janet,
contract is 2020,
wouldn't it be 2026? It's
yeah,
anniversary,
exactly.
right? So it'll be July 1st, 2026 for Janet in that case. I just wanted to add something as well. So we're in a similar boat. We signed our EA July 1st this year. So our target date is now July 1st, 2026 to get compliant. But what Tad says is completely right. You know, we're trying to solve for this now before we get into the new year. And we're tackling it a slightly different way. We're using FastPass tools to really seek the principle of least privilege. That's the target we've gone with, and licensing will be a byproduct of that for us. But yeah, you can't start early enough. This thing is really big, and the more that you dig into it, the more questions you'll have. Certainly, if you have multiple license types, that's where you're going to really see the difficult part of this. I think, Tad, you've got it way harder than I do because you have a mix of different business solutions in your D365. Mine's predominantly finance, and even with just finance, there are still some complications in there that I am seeing that we need to sort out for.
So
Steve,
yeah,
just to clarify for Janet real quick, she had mentioned that her licensing agreements effective July 1st, 24 to June 30th, 27.
Yep.
But her target date's still July 1st, 2026.
It
so
goes on the anniversary date.
Okay.
well, what I haven't gotten clarity from Microsoft, so maybe Alex can chime in what he's heard, is they say renewal in the language of their recent statements. They say renewal, but it's not clear to me if your true up date and your renewal date, if they count your true up date as a renewal, or whether it's just when you sign the new 3-year agreement in Jennifer's case.
Yeah, the way it was explained to me, Tad, for our situation was because our true update or our anniversary date is always July 1st of whatever year, that is our date. That's our target date. So it's the year after your last update, I guess, or last renewal. The wording could be better. I agree with you. And it took some explaining for me with my Microsoft team. But the other thing to throw out there as well, I don't know if you faced this already, Tad, but even when they told me that my date was still pushed out, my Microsoft account team were pushing me to go and fix this right now. They were monitoring it and they were telling me that I'm out of compliance. And my counter argument was, well, I'm not due to be compliant until middle of next year. So why would I make this a priority right now? But they were pushing me. They were on me straight away. They were looking at all of the PPAC reports and they were telling me where I was under licensed and I need to go and buy more.
Yeah, I get a little bit of that pushback as well. I do have some unassigned SCM licenses and a couple of other unassigned other licenses because I had to get enough extra ones to do some of the rejuggling.
Yeah.
So if they came and bugged me and said you're not paying enough, I'd like, yeah, I've got all these licenses that I'm paying for that I'm not actually assigning to somebody right now. So come back with I'm going to get this all right sized when I do my actual agreement renewal and reduce the count on this and increase the count on this. And so I'm paying extra right now just to have enough flexibility to move all of the deck chairs around. So come back later.
That they don't come to you and say that you've got too many licenses. They only come after you when you've got too few.
Yeah. Steve, to your point, one of the things that they added in the recent FAQ update, right, from the licensing side is that I believe because you're under the grace period, right, of the year that they're giving, they actually made sure to add language that Microsoft can do back billing for overusage. So to address that, I'm assuming that was part of the push from the Microsoft side is that they want you to be compliant as possible so they don't have to do that because I'm sure that's a nightmare for them as well. But yeah, if you are in the grace period, even though you don't have to be compliant until whatever date next year, right? Microsoft does call out that it does not forgive non-compliance in the meantime, and that if it's to a certain point, I'm sure Microsoft would try and back bill for the overages in that case.
Well, I mean, it goes back to your original agreement with Microsoft, which is we as a customer agree to have the correct licensing for all of our users. Now they're actually measuring it. Yes, the measuring stick is moving and changing shape every day, but we agreed to have the right licensing, and so we have to contend with that. So the sooner you can bring everything under control, the better. So the sooner you start, the better.
Thank you very much. I'm just gonna do a little bit fast forward. I mean, the conversations are great, and I think there are some questions. If one of you guys can monitor the chat, I think you're already doing, because I'm mainly focused on this. So I think the next question that we want to kind of answer with why Microsoft are doing this, I mean, the why is not so hard to figure out. Obviously, you know, to see all the other product that Microsoft they have in the Dynamics suite, they're already having, you know, enforcement. You cannot add any user to a BC in Business Central instance or CRM or any other apps, Teams, even before you have that license. So I think it was only a question of time when Microsoft are going to enforce the licensing. But obviously the fact that a lot of users, they were actually under license, and obviously that goes in favor of the clients to stay under license. And now I think Microsoft, they have the platform itself is stable enough for them to focus, you know, shift their focus more towards the licensing and making sure that, you know, they enforce that. One thing that I find a little bit unfortunate is that the way it's enforced is that a 1 or 0 logic, meaning if you don't have the right license, even if you have a good license, if it's not exactly what Microsoft are asking you, they will still not let you use the system at all. So that 0-1 logic is a little bit, I think, hard to explain to some of the customers. You have to have the exact same licensing that Microsoft require you to have, otherwise you will not be able to log in. Any comments, any question, anything on that why question you guys want to add? Basically why Microsoft are doing it now, and again, it's not so hard to figure it out anyways.
I think you covered it, Mo.
All right. Perfect. So yeah, I mean, some of the exceptions to this licensing, as Steve pointed out earlier, if you're a sysadmin and you don't have, even if you have other roles, you're exempt from this role. If you're external guest users, you are not included in that license enforcement. This does not happen that often, but if you're an external contractor or you're a partner and you're accessing your client's D365 with your domain account, you don't have to have a license. We talked about device users, they're not included. One of the important ones is the non-prod users. So if you're in UAT environment, you're in a dev environment, you don't have to worry about this. And this is interesting because I work in the CE world, and this is not the case. In CE, as far as I remember, when we were even in a test environment, you had to have a user. And then finally, if you're a service account, so you're not logging into the web portal of D365, but you're using the back end, the API, the OData, you don't have to actually have a license just now. And this is not, some of these are just a question of time. I think in the future, the service account, they will be enforced to have a license. So if you're doing any integration between your external system and D365, eventually you might have to have that. I think device users will be the same thing. Probably Microsoft are thinking of enforcing them as well. But for now, these are the exceptions. Anything else you guys would like to add to this part? All right. So in the next few slides, and we only have 15 minutes left, we're going to be talking about what are the tools that Microsoft made available to users to actually stay compliant with the policy, and how you can basically navigate through them and come up with the right tally for each license group. Again, this is going to be a conversation-based type of presentation. So at a high level, this is what we recommend that you do. Basically, you use PPAC or LCS. Both of these sources, they have the same information. They have a license usage report. First thing you do, you go in there, and I'm going to show you in a second, where you could see how many users are under license. And you have a report that gives you per user what are the required licenses that you have to assign to them to be compliant. So that is a users with unassigned licenses. You can click on that. You can check your users. The ones that don't have a valid license, you have to assign them licenses. Now, there are two scenarios. Either you already have a license purchased. All you have to do, if you have a license already there, sorry, all you have to do is that you have to go to Microsoft Admin Center and you have to assign that license to them. If you don't have a license, obviously you have to purchase the license from Microsoft through your CSP or LSP, and then go to Microsoft Admin Center and assign that license to that user. And then for that user, you're compliant. It's important to point this out here, the purchase license part, especially when you're in a tight timeline. So if you are only having 30 days to your anniversary or to your renewal, and you are missing so many licenses, that procurement process normally could take anywhere between 2 weeks to 2 months or 3 months. So you always want to make sure you actually, as Tad and Stephen, Alex said, you want to take as much time as possible so that if you have to buy additional licenses, that will not be a bottleneck for you to be compliant. So just make sure that, you know, if you think you're going to be way in compliant with the policy and you need a lot of users, you have to consider the time it takes to actually purchase the licenses and have them, you know, show up in your Microsoft Admin Center. Any other steps that you guys, any comments on this diagram and this chart?
Well, I mean, we talked that chart, that flow chart assumes that you're going to add a license. You may also find that you can remove or exchange roles for the user and downgrade the user to a license that they already have. So we're going to talk more about that in session 2, but you always have to, you have 2 options. You can spend more on licensing, or you can try to downgrade what people have rights to do.
By the way, session 2 is going to be starting right now. Apparently people are ready for it. Just kidding.
I haven't seen a lot of, you definitely can exchange. I've seen cases like that, but most of the projects that we have been working on has been always there. Most of them, they're under license, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't mean that you have to always buy licenses. You could potentially free up one user. You could free up licenses from users that they don't need them and assign them to other people who need them. Or you can actually do a swap. So we have seen clients where they say, hey, I have a lot of finance licenses, but I need project ops. So they go to Microsoft and say, hey, can I do a swap? So I give you my, you know, I basically replace some of these project ops licenses with finance. So those are obviously things that you can do. I mean, this is a little bit of simplistic flowchart, but yeah, for sure.
Do not count on license swapping as a mechanism with Microsoft. They'll make it tough for you.
Yeah. Well, they will definitely do it if it's not in their favor. They will definitely have a lot of pushback. I've seen a case where they actually swap licenses, but the project ops with actually a finance license, which we know that the SKUs are actually different pricing, and you never want to give up a finance and get a project ops. They accepted that, but it kind of makes sense why they did that. I'm pretty sure that they will not do the same thing if the table was turned.
Agreed. Yeah, they'll go with the highest cost license each time. But the beauty of the renewal being the driver for this is it's right on your true up. So you do get that possibility of bringing it down, if you like, or adding whatever you want to do. But that opens up that window for you to reduce in certain areas. So at least it's smart on Microsoft's part to put it at the renewal, because it does give the customer the flexibility. Prior to that, you know, if this hits mid-year for someone who's like I am, if it hit in November like it was meant to, I'd probably have to just go and buy loads more licenses and not be able to take any of the others out of play. So there is a silver cloud there somewhere. It's very, very small, but there is something there that you can lean on.
And a lot of the conversation has been around making sure you have enough licenses, but there's the opposite. You don't want, I think somebody had mentioned, you don't want to have too many licenses. You don't want to be over licensed and paying more than you need to be. So that's another important part of this process, and understanding your organization is getting, you want as true as possible, so that you're not, you know, spending tens of hundreds of thousands. Alex could probably tell you horror stories of, you know, 6-figure overages where people just don't know what you're paying. And so there's that opposite effect.
Absolutely, Bobby, and that's what end users like Tad and I and others who are on the call are going to have to work with. Like, how do you buy enough to ensure that there's still some flexibility, but ensuring that your CFO is not coming after you for spending too much. So
Right.
it's just going to be a fine line, and I think we'll cover that in the upcoming sessions.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you actually deal with this, and how do you maintain it? Because yeah, we're going to run into similar problems with this.
I mean, one thing that I'm trying to do is I'm trying to scale back the roles that people are assigned so that when it comes to our renewal and our signing our new agreement, I will have the opportunity to downsize the base licenses and move a lot of people to operations activity licenses. If I just said, well, I have the licenses now, I might as well assign them, then people are going to get so used to having those roles, I won't have the downsizing opportunity in a year. So you might end up carrying extra licenses as long as you know that you're carrying them with the intent to get rid of them at a particular milestone in your business cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I totally agree on the conversation. I think you should always think about license optimization while you do compliance, because as we said, there are a lot of opportunities where you see, yeah, before it was a buffet table, right? You could assign anything to anyone. So some people, they got a lot of roles that they probably don't need. Now that we are going towards more a la carte type of, licensing where you have to pay for everything that you order, then I think people are going to be start being much more smarter in picking which roles I'm going to assign to who, because then the difference is going to make is sometimes I'm going to bump someone from $50 to 210. So, and that's per month, obviously. You multiply that by the number of users that are over licensed, multiply that by 12, that gets easily into hundreds of thousands of dollars of saving when you just remove a couple of roles, or in a privilege, you just make a couple of entitlements read-only. So yeah, I think that license optimization and license compliance goes really hand in hand. And that's what I like about your comment, Tad, is start now. You don't have to wait until your anniversary, even if it's in November next year. Start now optimizing your roles, because when you're going to do actually enforcement, you know that you are buying the licenses for security roles that are already optimized. And then your bill is going to probably increase a little bit, maybe, and I think it's close to impossible, but you may be actually paying a little bit cheaper because now your roles are much more least privilege type of roles, and you're not actually over licensed either. So yeah, that optimization and license compliance enforcement, I think that is actually a very good opportunity to bring down the costs while you
I will say, if you're juggling these things and you get to the point where you have some extra SCM licenses, for example, and you can reduce the licensing, you can reduce the license level of a particular role, and now the license, the role can be accommodated by an operations activity license. Don't go buy more operations activity licenses. Just assign the SCM license that you have, which includes operations activity rights, and then mark that for your renewal date to say, this license can get downsized to the next lower level at your renewal date. So you gotta be careful you don't go buy team and activity licenses that you don't need because you're not using the higher level base licenses that include that entitlement. It is going to take some more accounting on the part of your security and licensing teams to keep track of all of that, but there are some interim steps you can do going up to your renewal date.
Absolutely.
And sorry to interrupt everyone. I need to drop. It's got to 5 minutes before the hour, so I just want to say thank you to everybody. And if you can find me on LinkedIn, please do. I'd be happy to connect, and if I can help anyone out with this stuff, more than happy to partake in that. All of the guys on here who are all knowledgeable about the licensing enforcement, and particularly Tad and I, we're living it with you guys. So we're having to make adjustments and changes on the fly as well. So appreciate it. Thank you, Mo, Tad, Alex, Bobby. Appreciate it. I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks, Steve.
Safe travels.
Thank you very much. So I think we're going to go a little bit faster on this one. So I mean, most of you have probably visited the PPAC. So the first item here, the first box here, you have to go to your PPAC. you already have some tiles here, and this is being actively worked on by Microsoft. And I guess in the next few months, I don't know, Alex, if you have any updates of when the preview features will be available, because I saw some of the preview features in a conversation with Yen from Microsoft. But basically, this is what you get. You do have to have an admin role in PPAC to be able to see this. And then you can go a little bit deeper into each user and see if they require a new license. And then also you do, when you click on that, the role that's required, you will see actually a recommendation from Microsoft, which one to make base and which one to make an attached license. So yeah, this is one of, I think that the primary tool will be PPAC to be used to actually go through all the users that you have and make sure that they are compliant. We also have to assign licenses. I mean, most of you already know, if you want to assign license to users, you have to have access to Microsoft Admin Center. Yeah, obviously that's a very high privileged type of role. So, but if you want to assign licenses to your user, you have to use this portal. Alex, do you have any comments on the PPAC? Any new features that you think and the timeline they're going to be available anytime soon?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is one of the areas where Microsoft has actually taken feedback on this. So like what you're seeing here is feedback from end users, MVPs, so they're actively trying to make this better. As far as new features, right, they're still trying to figure out what's the best, everyone wants the data a different way, right? So they're trying to figure out what is the best way to actually display it. I don't have a timeline, I guess, for this feature is going to come out on this date, but be sure to, stay up to date on, listen for any blog posts. I'm sure one of us will probably either write about it or talk about it at one of the sessions on, hey, these are new things coming out. So definitely be, stay in contact, right, to make sure you're up to date on it.
I mean, this interface will become more of a day-to-day thing for your license and security persons in your organization, because this is the place you're going to have to go to figure out why they can't log in.
Perfect. Yeah, and we're going to have, by the way, Saurabh from Microsoft in the next session. He already told me that he has a lot of information that they're confidential. He cannot probably talk about them publicly, but I think there are some new features coming up very shortly, and they'll be very interesting. He will be there definitely in the next session we're going to have, and that's what we're going to do in the next sessions, where we're going to get people from Microsoft, the licensing team who are actively working on these features to come in and comment on some of these changes that are happening. So I'm going to be very quick because you have only a minute left. The same report you see in LCS. I'm not going to go over this because if you have access to PPAC, you almost see the same information. And then you have the user security governance. We are not going to definitely talk about this with the limited time we have, but you do get a lot of very interesting reports. They are no longer in preview. The screenshot I have is preview, but they're no longer in preview. However, they are actually being actively worked on, and we do see still changes, for some security roles, as Alex and Tad pointed out, they are still changing stuff. So the rest of this conversation, we are not going to go through today, obviously, with the limited time we have. I'm just going to go to the slide where we talk about the next session. The next parts that we have, as I said, so the good news is that we are going to have this group of people here. Plus, we're going to have people from Microsoft joining us in the next session. So stay tuned. Next week, we are going to be actually going deep. In the next session, we're going to be going deep dive into how can you actually be compliant. All the tools that are available, we're going to look at USG. And then, as I said, the next ones are going to also follow. We are targeting, Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're talking early November for the next session with the same group plus some people from Microsoft.
Yep, I was just going to say, just to finalize this as we hit the top of the hour, just to make sure this gets on the recording, I'll talk to the group and we'll have a finalized schedule of the next dates published soon so people can start planning for that. Anybody that was on here will get notice of the upcoming sessions. so you can share them out, and we should be able to share all the information, and I'll create a recap off of the transcript and off of the recording to give out to everybody as well. So you've got some data to move forward with into the next session, and definitely, when we get this back to you, give us some feedback on what we can, help you with in the next sessions as well, so we can add that in. So appreciate everybody being on with us and sticking with us for the hour. It was a great hour, obviously packed with a lot of great information, and looking forward to the next sessions.
Thank you very much, everyone. Have a nice day.